Marcus Johnson stepped into the bustling Los Angeles International Airport, his eyes scanning the expansive terminal. The newly appointed CEO of a major airline felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as he contemplated his upcoming journey to New York. This flight would be his first as the head of the company, though his fellow passengers and the crew were unaware of his position. As he made his way to the gate, Marcus couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation and notice the curious glances thrown his way. He was used to being one of the few black executives in the room, but today felt different. The weight of his new responsibilities pressed upon him as he approached the boarding area. Once on the plane, Marcus settled into his first-class seat, observing the crew's interactions with other passengers. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The flight attendants seemed to be whispering among themselves, occasionally casting furtive glances in his direction. Their hushed tones and barely concealed smirks made him uncomfortable. Trying to brush off the unsettling feeling, Marcus attempted to flag down a flight attendant for a glass of water. To his surprise, the attendant walked past him without acknowledgement, instead tending to a white passenger seated nearby. The contrast in treatment was stark and unmistakable. Marcus took a deep breath, reminding himself of his position and the changes he hoped to implement. He knew that moments like these were precisely why his leadership was crucial. As the plane prepared for takeoff, he resolved to observe and document any further incidents, determined to address them head-on once he officially took the reins of the company. As the flight progressed, Marcus keenly observed the interactions between the crew and other passengers. The disparity in treatment became increasingly apparent. Flight attendants engaged in friendly banter with white passengers, offering extra pillows and blankets unprompted. In contrast, their interactions with Marcus remained cold and perfunctory, if they acknowledged him at all. The stark difference in service quality left Marcus feeling increasingly uncomfortable and isolated. He contemplated how to address this behavior without revealing his position prematurely, knowing that the true test of the company's culture would come from observing unfiltered actions. Midway through the flight, Marcus's thoughts were interrupted by a young woman settling into the seat next to him. She introduced herself as Sophia, a sociology student returning from a conference in Los Angeles. Her warm smile and genuine interest in conversation provided a welcome respite from the tension Marcus had been experiencing. Sophia enthusiastically shared her passion for diversity and inclusion, explaining how her studies focused on workplace equality and cultural sensitivity. She spoke about the importance of representation in leadership positions and the impact it could have on organizational culture. Marcus listened intently, finding her perspectives both refreshing and relevant to his new role. As their conversation deepened, Sophia mentioned an upcoming conference where she was scheduled to present her research on corporate diversity initiatives. She expressed her hope that major companies would take notice and implement meaningful changes. Little did she know that the man sitting beside her was in a position to do exactly that. Marcus found himself reinvigorated by Sophia's passion and optimism. Their discussion served as a poignant reminder of why he had accepted the CEO position and the positive change he could enact. As he listened to Sophia's ideas, he began mentally drafting plans for new company-wide policies, eager to put theory into practice. As the flight encountered a patch of turbulence, Marcus observed a stark contrast in how the crew handled passenger concerns. While flight attendants rushed to reassure and assist other travelers, they seemed to deliberately ignore Marcus's attempts to gain their attention. When he finally managed to flag down an attendant for a seatbelt extender, the response was curt and dismissive. The blatant disparity in treatment during a potentially stressful situation heightened Marcus's awareness of the deep-rooted issues within the company culture. He discreetly jotted down notes on his phone, documenting specific instances and the names of crew members involved. Beside him, Sophia noticed the tension and attempted to lighten the mood. She proposed a game of 20 questions to pass the time, sensing Marcus's discomfort but unaware of its true cause. Her gesture of friendliness provided a welcome distraction from the unsettling atmosphere. As they played, their conversation naturally steered towards more personal topics. Marcus, careful not to reveal his position, shared some of his experiences climbing the corporate ladder as a black man. He spoke of the countless times he had to prove himself beyond what was expected of his white counterparts and the microaggressions he encountered along the way. Sophia listened intently, offering empathetic responses and sharing her own experiences with discrimination as a woman in academia. She recounted instances of being talked over in class discussions or having her research topics dismissed as niche or too focused on minority issues. Their exchange highlighted the pervasive nature of discrimination across different sectors and reinforced Marcus's determination to implement sweeping changes within his new role. As they continued to share stories, Marcus felt a growing sense of responsibility not just to address the immediate issues on this flight, but to create lasting change that would benefit employees and passengers alike. As the flight progressed, the head of the cabin crew, a man named Richard, made his way down the aisle. His demeanor was friendly and professional as he interacted with most passengers, but his attitude shifted noticeably when he approached Marcus's row. Richard addressed Marcus with a tone that bordered on condescension, asking him to assist in reorganizing the overhead compartments. The request, made to no other passenger, carried an unmistakable air of disrespect. Marcus, maintaining his composure, complied without revealing his true position. Other crew members, taking cues from Richard, began to join in with subtle jabs and dismissive behavior. They exchanged knowing glances and suppressed chuckles at Richard's thinly veiled remarks, creating an increasingly hostile environment. Marcus, determined to document every incident, discreetly pulled out a small notebook he had brought along. He began jotting down specific interactions, times, and names, ensuring he had a detailed record of the discriminatory behavior he was experiencing. Sophia, who had been observing the situation unfold, leaned closer to Marcus and spoke in a low voice. "You know, you shouldn't have to tolerate this treatment," she said, her expression a mix of concern and indignation. "Have you considered reporting this behavior to the airline's management?" Marcus nodded thoughtfully, appreciating Sophia's support while internally acknowledging the irony of the situation. "I've been thinking about how to address it effectively," he replied, careful not to reveal his position. Sophia, emboldened by their earlier conversation about workplace equality, continued, "Someone in a position of power needs to make real changes in companies like this. It's not enough to have diversity policies on paper. They need to be enforced and ingrained in the culture." Her words resonated deeply with Marcus, reinforcing his resolve to use his new position to drive meaningful change within the airline. He realized that this flight, as uncomfortable as it was providing invaluable first-hand experience of the issues he would need to address. As Richard made another pass, throwing a disdainful look their way, Marcus and Sophia exchanged a knowing glance. The incident only strengthened their impromptu alliance and Marcus's determination to transform the company's culture from the top down. As the plane began its descent into New York, Marcus steeled himself for the revelation to come. He watched the cabin crew bustling about, making final preparations for landing, their demeanor towards him unchanged. Marcus took a deep breath, mentally rehearsing how he would introduce himself and address the behavior he had witnessed throughout the flight. The moment the plane touched down and taxied to the gate, a palpable sense of anticipation filled the air. Passengers began gathering their belongings, eager to disembark. Marcus, however, remained seated, waiting for the right moment to make his move. As the seatbelt sign turned off and passengers started to file out, Marcus stood up and cleared his throat loudly. "Excuse me, everyone. I have an announcement to make," he said, his voice carrying authority throughout the cabin. The crew and nearby passengers turned to look at him, curiosity and confusion evident on their faces. Richard, the head of the cabin crew, approached with a hint of annoyance. "Sir, we need to clear the aircraft. Any complaints can be filed at the customer service desk," he said dismissively. Marcus smiled, his expression calm but determined. "That won't be necessary, Richard. Allow me to introduce myself properly. I'm Marcus Johnson, the new CEO of this airline." The cabin fell into stunned silence. Richard's face drained of color, his expression a mix of shock and dawning horror. Other crew members exchanged panicked glances, suddenly realizing the gravity of their actions during the flight. Marcus continued, his voice firm but not unkind. I've observed a lot during this flight, and it's clear we have significant work to do regarding diversity and inclusion within our company. Starting immediately, we will be implementing a comprehensive program to address these issues. He turned to address the entire crew. I want each of you to reflect on your actions and attitudes today. This isn't about punishment. It's about growth and creating a better environment for all our employees and passengers. Sophia, still seated nearby, looked on with a mix of awe and admiration. Marcus caught her eye and nodded, acknowledging the role their conversations had played in shaping his immediate response to the situation. As Marcus finished speaking, the cabin remained silent, the impact of his words sinking in. The crew members, particularly Richard, appeared shaken, the reality of their behavior and its consequences finally hitting home. In the wake of Marcus's revelation, the atmosphere in the cabin shifted dramatically. The crew, initially stunned into silence, began to react in various ways. Some looked genuinely remorseful, others defensive, while a few seemed eager to align themselves with the new CEO's vision. Marcus, maintaining his composure, addressed the group again. I understand this is a lot to process, but I want to make it clear that from this moment on, we're embarking on a journey of change. Our airline will become a leader in diversity and inclusion, not just in words, but in actions. The crew members exchanged glances, a mix of uncertainty and curiosity evident on their faces. One flight attendant hesitantly raised her hand. Mr. Johnson, what exactly does this program entail? Marcus appreciated the question, seeing it as an opportunity to engage the team. He outlined his initial thoughts on mandatory sensitivity training, revising hiring practices, and creating channels for reporting and addressing discriminatory behavior. As he spoke, Marcus noticed Sophia listening intently. An idea struck him. In fact, he said, turning to her, I'd like to invite Ms. Sophia here to participate in developing this program. Her expertise in sociology and passion for diversity could be invaluable. Sophia's eyes widened in surprise and excitement. I'd be honored, Mr. Johnson, she stammered, still processing the unexpected turn of events. Richard, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. His tone was defensive and dismissive. With all due respect, sir, I don't think such drastic measures are necessary. We've always operated efficiently, and these changes could disrupt our workflow. Marcus turned to Richard, his gaze steady. Richard, it's precisely that attitude that necessitates these changes. Efficiency at the cost of respect and equal treatment is not acceptable. As Richard opened his mouth to argue further, several other crew members began to voice their support for Marcus's initiative. They shared brief accounts of discrimination they'd witnessed or experienced, emboldened by the CEO's openness. The tide of the conversation began to turn. Even those who were initially skeptical started to see the potential benefits of the proposed changes. Marcus observed this shift with cautious optimism, recognizing that while there was still resistance, particularly from Richard, the seeds of change had been planted. As the discussion continued, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but the engagement he was seeing, both positive and negative, confirmed the necessity of his actions. With Sophia's expertise and the support of those willing to embrace change, he was confident they could transform the airline's culture for the better. In the weeks following the flight incident, Marcus wasted no time in implementing his diversity and inclusion program. The airline's headquarters buzzed with activity as workshops were organized and listening sessions scheduled. Employees from all levels of the company were encouraged to participate, share their experiences, and contribute ideas for improvement. The initial sessions revealed a depth of issues that even Marcus hadn't fully anticipated. Staff members, feeling emboldened by the new CEO's approach, began to open up about long-suppressed experiences of discrimination, microaggressions, and systemic barriers they'd faced within the company. One particularly poignant moment came when a Black flight attendant shared her story of being passed over for promotion multiple times, despite her qualifications. Her account resonated with many others, sparking a frank discussion about unconscious bias in the workplace. As the program gained momentum, Marcus noticed a shift in the company's atmosphere. Many employees embraced the initiative, expressing relief and hope for positive change. However, pockets of resistance remained, with Richard emerging as the most vocal opponent. Richard's hostility towards the new measures grew increasingly apparent. He began to question Marcus's qualifications openly, insinuating that his appointment was merely a publicity stunt to appease diversity quotas. His attempts to undermine the program became more frequent and blatant. During a company-wide meeting, Richard interrupted Marcus's presentation on the program's progress. "This is all well and good," he said dismissively, "but when are we going to focus on what really matters? Our bottom line? All this sensitivity training is eating into our productivity." Marcus, maintaining his composure, addressed Richard's concerns head-on. "Richard, I appreciate your focus on our financial performance. However, creating an inclusive environment isn't just the right thing to do. It's also good for business. Diverse teams are more innovative and better at problem solving. We're not just building a more equitable workplace. We're positioning ourselves for long-term success." The room fell silent as Marcus and Richard locked eyes, the tension palpable. It was clear that this confrontation was about more than just company policy. It was a clash between old prejudices and a new vision for the future. Marcus, drawing on his years of experience navigating corporate politics, decided to take a different approach. "Richard," he said, his tone firm but not antagonistic, "I'd like you to lead our next workshop on unconscious bias. Your perspective as a longtime employee could be valuable in helping others understand the need for change." Richard, caught off guard by this unexpected request, stammered a reluctant agreement. As the meeting adjourned, Marcus knew that the Real challenge was just beginning. Changing deeply ingrained attitudes would take time and persistence, but he was more determined than ever to see it through. The launch event for the Diversity and Inclusion Program marked a significant milestone for the airline. The company's largest conference room was packed with employees from various departments, media representatives, and industry observers. The air buzzed with anticipation as Marcus took the stage to introduce the initiative. Marcus began by sharing his personal experience on that fateful flight, his words resonating with many in the audience who had faced similar discrimination. He then outlined the program's goals and the changes already implemented, emphasizing the long-term benefits for both employees and the company's success. As Marcus concluded his speech, he introduced Sophia as a key consultant for the program. Sophia stepped up to the podium, her presence commanding attention. She delivered a powerful address, drawing on her academic research and personal experiences to illustrate the critical need for change in corporate culture. "Diversity isn't just about numbers," Sophia asserted, her voice strong and clear. "It's about creating an environment where everyone feels valued, heard, and empowered to contribute their best. This program isn't just changing policies. It's changing lives and shaping the future of this industry." The audience responded with enthusiastic applause, many nodding in agreement. The atmosphere was charged with a sense of hope and possibility. However, as the applause died down, Richard's voice cut through the positive energy. "This all sounds nice in theory," he called out from his seat, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "But how do you propose to measure the success of this program? Feelings don't pay the bills or keep planes in the air." A tense hush fell over the room. Sophia, caught off guard by the direct challenge, looked to Marcus for guidance. Marcus, however, saw this as an opportunity to address the resistance head-on. He calmly approached the microphone. "Thank you for that question, Richard. It's an important one." Marcus then turned to address the entire audience. "Success isn't just about numbers on a balance sheet. It's about retention rates, employee satisfaction, and the quality of our service. But since you mentioned measurable outcomes, Richard, let me be clear. I expect this program to improve our bottom line by fostering innovation, reducing turnover, and enhancing our reputation." Marcus paused, his gaze sweeping the room before settling back on Richard. "I'd like you to explain to everyone here how your actions as a leader have contributed to a positive work environment. Can you share specific examples of how you've promoted inclusivity and respect among your team members?" The room fell silent, all eyes now on Richard. The challenge was clear: defend your leadership or acknowledge the need for change. Richard's face reddened, his usual bravado faltering under the scrutiny. As the tension in the room mounted, it became clear that this confrontation was a turning point. The outcome would set the tone for the program's future and the company's commitment to real, lasting change. As the days passed following the launch event, the atmosphere within the company became increasingly charged. Richard's public challenge and Marcus's response had created a clear divide among the staff. While many rallied behind Marcus's vision for change, a small but vocal group, led by Richard, continued to resist. Richard's isolation within the company grew more pronounced. Colleagues who once laughed at his jokes now avoided eye contact in the hallways. In meetings, his suggestions were met with skepticism, his authority quietly eroding. Despite the growing pressure, Richard doubled down on his opposition. He began holding unofficial meetings with like-minded employees, spreading doubts about the effectiveness of the diversity program and questioning Marcus's leadership capabilities. Marcus, aware of these undercurrents, decided it was time for decisive action. He had been meticulously gathering evidence of discriminatory behavior, not just from the initial flight, but throughout the company. This included emails, witness statements, and recorded incidents that painted a clear picture of a systemic problem. In a bold move, Marcus called for an emergency board meeting. As the directors filed into the conference room, the tension was palpable. Marcus stood at the head of the table, a folder of documents in hand, his expression grave but determined. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Marcus began, his voice steady, "I've called this meeting to address a serious issue that threatens the very core of our company's values and future success." He proceeded to lay out the evidence he had collected, starting with a detailed account of the discriminatory treatment he experienced on the flight. Marcus then presented a series of emails, reports, and testimonies that revealed a pattern of bias and misconduct, with Richard at the center of many incidents. The board members listened in stunned silence as Marcus played audio recordings of Richard, making derogatory comments about minority employees and dismissing concerns about workplace discrimination. "This behavior is not only morally reprehensible," Marcus continued, "but it also poses a significant legal and reputational risk to our company. It undermines everything we stand for and everything we're trying to achieve with our diversity and inclusion initiatives." As the presentation concluded, the room fell silent. The evidence was irrefutable, the implications severe. Board members exchanged worried glances, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Marcus looked around the room, meeting each board member's eyes. "We have a choice to make," he said firmly. "We can either address this head-on and reaffirm our commitment to creating an inclusive workplace, or we can turn a blind eye and risk everything we've built. I know where I stand. The question is, where do you?" The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the weight of the decision before them evident in their expressions. It was clear that this moment would define the future of the company and test the true depth of their commitment to change. The boardroom remained tense as the directors processed the overwhelming evidence Marcus had presented. After a brief discussion, the decision was unanimous. Richard's behavior was unacceptable and action needed to be taken immediately. The board chair cleared his throat and addressed Marcus. "Mr. Johnson, in light of this irrefutable evidence, we have no choice but to terminate Richard's employment effective immediately. His actions go against everything this company stands for and the direction we're heading." Marcus nodded solemnly. "I appreciate your swift decision. It's crucial that we send a clear message that discrimination and harassment will not be tolerated at any level of our organization." As the meeting adjourned, Marcus felt a mix of relief and determination. The hardest part was over, but the real work of changing the company culture was just beginning. Word of Richard's dismissal spread quickly through the company. The reaction was mixed, shock from some, relief from others, and a palpable sense that a significant shift had occurred. In the following days, Marcus held a company-wide meeting to address the situation. He stood before his employees, his presence both authoritative and approachable. "Recent events have been challenging for all of us," he began, "but they've also presented an opportunity for growth and positive change. Richard's departure is not about punishment, but about aligning our actions with our values. Moving forward, I want everyone to know that your voices matter, your experiences are valid, and your contributions are valued. As Marcus spoke, he noticed Sophia in the audience, her eyes shining with pride and admiration. Her presence reminded him of how far they'd come since that fateful flight. The response from the employees was overwhelming. Many stood up, applauding Marcus's leadership and commitment to change. Others shared their own stories, finally feeling safe to speak up about their experiences. In the weeks that followed, the impact of Marcus's actions became evident. Employee morale improved, and there was a noticeable increase in collaboration across departments. The Diversity and Inclusion program gained momentum, with more employees actively participating in workshops and initiatives. Sophia's role expanded, and she became a key figure in implementing the new policies. Her academic background combined with real-world application created a powerful force for change within the company. As Marcus watched these positive changes unfold, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From a passenger facing discrimination to a CEO driving industry-wide change, he realized that his experience had not only transformed the company, but had also inspired others to stand up against injustice. The airline began to receive recognition for its progressive policies, setting a new standard in the industry. Marcus knew there was still much work to be done, but he was confident that they were on the right path. As he looked out over the bustling airport from his office window, he smiled, knowing that each plane that took off carried not just passengers, but also the promise of a more inclusive and respectful future.